Welcome to Torah Parsha Tavo. I understand this is backwards or whatever, in reverse, but I'm sure you can still read it. Let me get my tissues because the allergies are on point. I'd like to dedicate this shiur to a few people today, to Rav Bernstein as usual, and to my mother Iris Elizabeth Roque, to Charlie Kirk, to Carolyn Jones, and to Rabbi Beryl Vine. Who would you like to dedicate this shiur to? May their memories be for a blessing. And I just want to show you, Rabbi Beryl Vine is a titan. He was huge in documenting the history of the Jewish people, and then he also has books focused on more so like the tradition as it went into Europe, the Ashkenazi tradition, I guess. But I'm looking for a good book like this for the Sephardi tradition. So if anybody knows, let me know. But Rabbi Beryl Vine, he passed away, I'm going to say maybe a couple weeks ago, and I forgot to announce in his memory as well. So, okay. We are going to be talking, this is Torah Parsha Tavo. It means when you will come into the land. And remember, Moshe is giving these, listing out these commandments for when you get into the land. These commandments can't be done while you're in Moab, where he is. They have to be done when you get in the land. And even with fruits and things of this nature, if I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to wait 3 years before you can take the fruit of the first tree for consumption. So the 4th year is when you can start using the fruit, and when you would do this. That's my understanding, but correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so let's do, so the question of today is, what is first fruits, which we know in Hebrew is Bikkurim. So our focus verses, we have a few for today, is going to be Deuteronomy, or Devarim, chapter 26, verses 1 through 11. And I'm going to be reading them from Art Scrolls Rashi, the book dedicated to Devarim, or Deuteronomy. So that's what it looks like. I highly suggest for any beginner to get this set. I should do if you ever want me to do a review on something, let me know. I'm going to take my time today because these allergies are kicking up. All right, so let's start with verse 1, Deuteronomy 26, verse 1 through 11. It will be when you enter the land that Hashem your God gives you as an inheritance. And, so first you got to enter the land, and you take possession of the land, and you dwell in the land. So all these conditions have to be met in order to perform this commandment or this mitzvah. Then you shall take of the first of every fruit of the ground that you bring in from your land that Hashem your God gives you. And you shall put it in a basket, and you're going to go to the place that Hashem your God will choose to make his name rest there. You shall come to the Kohen, the high priest, who will be in those days, whoever the high priest is in that time, and you're going to say to him, and this is what's called the confessional. This is what you're going to say. Follow me. We're in verse 3. Verse 3. You're going to say to the Kohen, the high priest, with this basket, I declare today to Hashem, your God priest, that I have come to the land that Hashem swore to our forefathers to give us. The Kohen shall take the basket from your hand and lay it before the altar of Hashem, your God. And then you shall call out and say before Hashem, your God, an Aramean would have destroyed my father, and he descended to Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, and then he became a nation, great, strong, and numerous. The Egyptians mistreated us and afflicted us and placed hard work on us. Then we cried out to Hashem, the God of our forefathers, and Hashem heard our voice and saw our affliction, our travail, and our oppression. Hashem took us out of Egypt with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm and with great great awesomeness, and with signs, with wonders. And he brought us to this place, and he gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now, behold, I have brought this first fruit of the ground that you have given me, O Hashem, and you shall place it before Hashem, your God, And you shall prostrate yourself before Hashem, your God. You shall rejoice with all the goodness that Hashem, your God, has given you and to your household, you and the Levite and the convert who is in your midst. So the cool thing about this particular mitzvah is everyone has to do it. That has conditions as well. And that's what Rav Bernstein wanted us to understand. This Feast of First Fruits, not everyone is doing this. So now that we've read our focus verse, I'm going to color that in. So first fruit or Bikkurim basics. Now let me turn to my Rav Bernstein notes. I'm going to put this to the side. And so in our notes, Rav Bernstein kind of gave us understanding of what the Bikkurim was. So the first question he asked, he said, okay, so hey class, like, do we celebrate? Oh, and if you're first time here, I am Christian. Rav Bernstein is a rabbi in the Orthodox persuasion, and he taught us Christians how to understand the Torah and even the Brit Hadashah, or as you would call it, the New Testament, and how to understand what's being said in these documents, these holy documents, so that we could actually understand what's going on here. So the question was, I'm Christian. So do we celebrate this holiday outside the land of Israel? And the answer is no. It says, and when you come into the land, and you have to bring it to where Hashem's name is. So at the time, it's going to be wherever the Mishkan is. The Mishkan is another way to say the tabernacle. We know in the book of Judges, it was in Shiloh for almost like 400 years. Then you have the temple itself. That's going to be a place where Hashem's name is. So wherever Hashem has caused his name to be. Later on, we know it as Solomon's temple. Okay? So that's where it's going to be. It's when you come into the land. So if you're in the land. So the next question is, so what actually is brought for the first fruits? Because you saw in the description, it says the first fruit of the ground. So the sages say, the sages are the wise men of Israel who help the people understand exactly what they're supposed to do. Because when you're reading in Rashi, it just says, like when Moshe is saying, it just says, so verse 2, that you shall take of the first of every fruit of the ground that you bring in from your land, Hashem, your God gives you. And you'll say to yourself, well, which fruits are those? And that's a good question. So the sages always get together and say, let's put some parameters around what Moshe is saying so that we can be sure that we're doing what Hashem wants us to do. That is where you get the oral Torah, the oral tradition, because that's how you understand the written. It'll say first fruits, and you'll have everybody bringing all crazy stuff. To somebody, this is the fruit of the ground. And to another person, everybody's got an opinion. Y'all know how that goes. So the oral Torah has come to put a boundary, some definition around what you're supposed to do. So this is what the sages say. These are the things these are the 7 species of what you're going to bring. Figs. First fruits applies to figs, grapes, olives, pomegranates, wheat, barley, and dates. I'll say it again. Figs, grapes, olives, pomegranates, wheat, barley, dates. I don't know if pomegranates is plural or maybe it's like deer where you say it like pomegranate. All right, so those are the 7 species of the things that you're going to bring for first fruits. So then the next question he asked us, and it says all these things are mostly in there except what to bring. So the sages had to clarify that for the Jewish people so they knew exactly what to bring. How much should be brought? So, and again, this is for people in the land of Israel. If you were someone that was not in the land of Israel, you're not bringing first fruits because you're not in the land of Israel. And again, we really want to understand what first fruits is because what we'll find later on, especially those of us in Christianity, what we find on later in 1 Corinthians. So how much should be brought? Well, it's got to fit in a basket, okay? A basket, something that a person can carry. That's what has to be in the that's how much you're going to bring, the volume that one person can carry. So, and you can only bring what you farmed. So basically, so say like I have a farm of my farm grows figs, and I rent it out to 3 people a piece a week, whatever, or I have hired workers, whatever. I'm still the one that has to make sure that that first fruit goes there. And I know there's some debate from the sages if the person you rent it out to, if they have to do it too or not. But at the end of the day, I'm the one that property is mine. That's my farm. I need to make sure that Hashem is his commandment is being satisfied. So all right, so what happens if you have 2 or more of these species? So say I have a farm that has figs and olives. So that looks like I'll be bringing them separately, and you have to do that for each species that you have. Again, species are figs, grapes, olives, pomegranate, wheat, barley, dates. Okay, so we're not talking about tons and tons of fruit. Okay. And the next question someone asked in the class was, how can you tell what of your crops is Bikkurim? So what's the actual first fruit? And Rashi tells us, so Rav Bernstein read from the Rashi, when you're going to walk around your property and you're going to see things starting, it's the season for budding. So you're going to see that. And you're going to take a grass reed or something like that, and you're going to tie it around the things that you see that are preparing to be fruit. And you're going to tie your string around several of the trees or whatever in your land, so that when they ripen, you have choices of the first fruit. It just won't be one. They'll all be kind of like in this. Some ripen before the others or whatever it is. So you'll just tie around there. And then, so say like if the bugs ate this batch, at least you can now go over here and put enough from these other batches in your basket to take that to the temple. Okay, so all right. Okay, so now Rav Bernstein gave us a little understanding of how first fruits happened. These are holidays. These are national holidays. First fruit is a national holiday. Bikkurim, Yom HaBikkurim, is a national holiday. So it's not like someone is doing this separate from the other. So he said something really cool. So he said, like, say for instance, all the fig farmers, they're gonna kind of like, hey Bob, you getting ready for Bikkurim? Yeah, Sam, and so they would kind of like do this all together. And he said they would the night before have like a big party as they're preparing to make a procession to go to the temple and drop these things off. Now I don't know if people traveled to the temple or the Mishkan, the tabernacle, or wherever it was kind of like waiting to do this together, and then they had the party there around the temple or tabernacle. But whatever it was, everybody did it together. It's not like one person just and also with the Bikkurim, with the first fruits, these different species, again, figs, grapes, olives, pomegranate, wheat, barley, dates, they all develop at different times. So the Bikkurim is not something it just happens on one date. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But so anyway, they bring it down and the people, they actually bring it down and put it next to the altar, not on the altar like a Kohen, but they can put it next to the altar without being disrespectful, because this is a people's offering. And while they give it to the Kohen, then they start to recite the paragraph, and that's what we were reading. You're going to come to the Kohen who will be in those days, and you're going to say to the Kohen, I declare today to Hashem, your God, that I have come to the land. I'm in verse 3. Come to the land that Hashem swore to our forefathers to give us. And then the Kohen is going to take the basket from your hand, and lay it before the altar of Hashem your God. And then, so the farm owners are doing this. The Kohen takes this fruit, and this fruit, this is not something that goes up in smoke on the altar. This is for the Kohanim to eat from. So, let me see. The Levites also, they had area around cities and things, so they have to do it too. And if you remember in verse 11, it tells you who has to do this. You, like all of Israel who has land, everybody in Israel, the Levite and the convert. These are the three groups of people that have to do this. Regular people, all the other tribes of Israel, the Levite tribe, the Levitical tribe in Israel, and the convert. They all have to do this if they own land with one of these species on it. Now, the Kohen didn't have to do it because they did not farm. And this is why this is going for the Kohen, the Kahuna, not necessarily the Levites. The Levites can provide for themselves, but the Kohen is always receiving the meat and things from other people. So that's what's going on here with the first fruit. Okay, so what does not count as a Bikkurim or first fruit? So the firstborn of animals, that's not necessarily a Bikkurim. That is, what you're going to do is either you're going to take that animal that's born first of the womb, if you will, and that animal, you're either going to take it and, they do what they do with it at the temple, or you're going to get the monetary value of it and give that to the temple. But that's not a first fruit. First fruit is got to be one of the 7 species. Again, figs, grapes, olives, pomegranate, wheat, barley, dates. So just by the nature of it, and it says in the commandment, it has to be fruit of the ground. So an animal is not a fruit of the ground. So an animal does not count as a Bikkurim, even though it can be first of the womb. Okay. Also, what does not count as the Bikkurim is the Omer. And this is huge. We're going to talk about this in a little bit. But I want to, actually, let's talk about it a little bit now. So the first fruit is the basket of the 7 species that you carry. The Omer is different. The Omer is that barley or wheat. I always get mixed up which comes first. But it's a sheaf. If anybody's gone to a farm and they've seen a big barley, wheat stalks and stuff, that's a sheaf. That big looking like hay thing, that's what that is. That's what you bring for the Omer. That is not first fruits. That is for this is the first sheaf. The first sheaths are brought, and this was done through Shavuot, or the Feast of Weeks, if you will. This is not the Bikkurim. So that's a Feast of Weeks, and those are sheaths that you bring, not a basket, okay? So the Bikkurim were brought starting at the Bikkurim, those 7 species, figs, grapes, olives, pomegranate, wheat, barley, dates. Yes, we do have wheat and barley in them, but for the actual first fruits, they were brought starting at the Feast of Weeks all the way through the Feast of Tabernacles. So you can see right there the difference between the Omer and the Bikkurim. They're brought all year long because these 7 species are developing throughout the year. They continue into Sukkot and even past Sukkot. So the Feast of Tabernacles is usually like October, September-ish. So, and they will be brought up sometimes even till Hanukkah, and Hanukkah can be in December sometimes. But if you brought your basket of first fruits around the time of Hanukkah, you don't get the benefit of getting the blessing, but you do get the benefit of bringing your material and giving it to the Kohen for them to eat. So, and it was very common that the Bikkurim were brought every day from the time of the Shavuot, which we know starts after or during the Feast of Matzah, all the way to the Feast of Tabernacles. So you're bringing it every day. The only day you can't bring first fruits in your basket is on Shabbat. Okay, so I'm going to mark off that we did the first fruit basics. And okay, so also Rav Bernstein wanted us to know. So he said the Hebrew roots people. I'm not too familiar with them, but he said for the Hebrew roots, they have a practice of calling the second day of Pesach or Passover, which is the Feast of Matzah, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They have a habit of calling that second day in that week first fruits. And this is misleading. It's not first fruits at all. It's the first Omer. And the Omer is actually the sheath that's brought and not the basket. So I just want to do that. So let's do the summary of, we'll get back into that here. Let's get into the summary of what happened. So you gather the fruit, first fruit of your if you're growing figs, grapes, olives, pomegranate, wheat, barley, dates. It's got to fit in a basket. You're going to bring the basket to the temple or wherever Hashem is calling his name. His name causes his name to be. It could be the tabernacle, whatever. You're going to go there. You're going to make the blessing with the Kohen, the high priest. And you're going to give that Bikkurim, that first fruit basket, to the Kohen. The Kohen's going to lay it next to the altar. Then you're going to recite the confession. My father was an Aramean. My father was, let me see. Actually, it starts in verse, 5. You're going to call out and say before Hashem. I'm going to read it again, just so you can know what's going on. We'll need that actually for later. An Aramean would have destroyed my father. And he descended to Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, and there he became a nation, great, strong, and numerous. The Egyptians mistreated us and afflicted us, and placed hard work upon us. Then we cried out to Hashem, the God of our forefathers, and Hashem heard our voice, saw our affliction, our travail, and our oppression. Hashem took us out of Egypt with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm, with great awesomeness, and with signs and wonders. And he brought us to this place, and he gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now, behold, I have brought the first fruit of the ground that you have given me, O Hashem, and you shall place it before Hashem, your God. And you shall prostrate yourself before Hashem, your God, and you shall rejoice with all the goodness that Hashem, your God, has given to you and your household. And who's got to do it again? You, all of Israel, who owns land, the Levite that owns land, and the convert that owns land. Land, not any land. Remember, it has to be something that grows of the 7 species. Figs, grapes, olives, pomegranate, wheat, barley, dates. Okay? All right. So you're going to do that. So you're going to prostrate yourself before the Lord your God. And I'm going to say, and you're going to recite that confession. That confession is what we just read. And now that we've done the summary of presenting the Bikkurim, the first fruits, let's go back and understand the misconceptions in non-Jewish faiths. People get confused, the Omer, the sheath, versus the Bikkurim. Okay. The sheath, again, is that second day in Pesach when you have that, again, I can't remember if it's wheat or barley, but you get that, and you're bringing every day when you're counting the Omer and bringing the Omer, it's a sheaf. It's that big stalks of wheat that you're bringing. Stalks. Big. Huge. Okay? The Bikkurim, the first fruit, is a basket that you can carry. So if you own a farm and you have wheat, you are going to put the wheat in a basket and carry that to the temple. If you are doing the Omer with a sheaf, it will be that big stalks that you tie together and carry there. 2 different things. Think big stalks for the Omer, and it can only be that wheat and barley, whatever is going on there. If I forget, I'm sorry about that. But when it comes to first fruits, it has to be brought in a basket. And we saw that in the beginning. That's how you know the difference between the Omer and the Bikkurim, the first fruit. So when you think Omer, which is the Feast of Weeks, when you're doing that for 50 days, think about the big stalks. Okay, when you're talking about first fruits Bikkurim, that's the basket. Okay, huge. Okay, so now that that's done, Rav Bernstein also wanted us to understand something important. It's this word in Deuteronomy chapter 10. So once you've done all that and you've said all what you're saying to the Cohen, and you make that confession, an Aramean would have destroyed my father. At the end in verse 10, it says, and now behold, I have brought the first fruit of the ground that you have given me, O Hashem. And then Moshe says, then you're going to place that before Hashem, your God, and you're going to prostrate yourself before Hashem, your God. Now let's talk about this word prostrate. This is something that Rav Bernstein really wanted us to understand. Vahishtahavta, that's you prostrate, but vahishtahav means prostrate. And unfortunately for us who do not have such a word, prostrate means you are getting on the ground, your face to the ground, and you're laid out. Now the sages debate, Rav Bernstein taught us the sages debate whether you lay out completely flat or if you lay out with your knees bent. But in both ways, your face is to the ground. And that is prostration, that is hishtav. And we sometimes, because we don't have this word in English, we will translate this word as worship. That word worship means to have your head to the ground and bowing before Hashem. Hishtahav. So it is not understood. It is not Jewish understanding to look at the word worship and think singing and praising. There is singing and praising at the beginning. It's called Psuke Zimra. And that's when you're doing the Psalms of David. But when you're doing the Psalms of David, you're not laid out like that. Now, that doesn't mean, Rav Bernstein showed us, that you can't be hishtahav and singing at the same time. But if you are worshiping, your head is going to be on the ground. Your forehead is going to be on that ground. Anytime you see the word worship in Hebrew, and especially if it's the word hishtahav, it is your head to the ground. If you're thinking of the word worship as singing and praising, that is something else. That is whatever thing, but that is not Judaism. Judaism, hishtahav, worship, means head to the ground. So when Moshe is saying, and you're going to give that basket to the Cohen, the high priest, and you're going to hishtahav yourself before Hashem, your forehead is going to be on that ground. Okay, so that's really important. The way we understand the word worship now, and maybe you'll say to yourself, oh, I prostrate myself in my heart every Sunday, and that may be true, Rav Bernstein said. But this still ain't putting your head to the ground. Like, putting your head to the ground is putting your head to the ground. No one says, oh, I always, I think about eating. No, you eat. Either you're eating or you're not. Like, okay, so the idea is, if you're worshiping, your head is going to be to the ground. Now, and also, this hishtahav is not something you're doing every Shabbat. The hishtahav, as you can see, goes with the Bikkurim. Prostrating yourself with your head to the ground, Rav Bernstein taught us, is something that is special and not done every day. That is another reason it doesn't equate to what we know in Christianity as whatever we call worship. If you're doing it every Sunday, that is not hishtahav. You are not worshiping. Worshiping is called for in special holidays and special times. Again, worshiping means your head is to the ground, and it's special, and it is not done every Shabbat. So Rav Bernstein wanted to make sure we were clear on what Israel is doing when they are hishtahaving or worshiping versus what we now understand in Christianity. And by the way, Rav Bernstein also said that this is a new construct that has happened. This idea of worshiping in church is very new. And if you don't believe, go to the Catholic Church. You don't see them doing whatever that is, because that is a, singing and you going like this. That is new. That is not something. And if you went to the times of Yeshua and you said, I am hishtahaving, and you start singing and waving your arms like this and say, I'm worshiping, Yeshua going to look at you like, What? No, that's called singing. That's not Hishtahab. That's not worship. Worship is when your head is to the ground in a place where Hashem tells you to do that. Okay? So please, I hope that that is clear. Okay. So that's our Hishtahab. You'll find that word in Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 10. And now let's go back to the story real quick. The part where it says, who is the Aramean? When it says, let me go back. I'm all mixed up. It says, an Aramean would have destroyed my father. So that's verse 5. So who is the actual Aramean? So when the Jew is confessing this, who is he talking about? Who is the Aramean that would have destroyed my father, his father? The Aramean is Laban. This is the story of Israel or Yaakov. So the Aramean is Laban. And who's the father? Israel, Jacob, Yaakov, the father of all the tribes. So this is who you're starting out talking about in this confession. An Aramean would have destroyed my father. And we know that Laban did mean to cause harm to Jacob. And then that's what that part is. And then Jacob descended into Egypt and sojourned there, right? Yaakov went he followed, Joseph was already there, and then all the other tribes go. And the story continues. It's the story of the Jewish people. But the Aramean is Laban. And the father in that story is Yaakov or Jacob. All right. So let's just do this. And now, let me look at my notes from Rav Bernstein. So, all right. So now when we talk about, Yeshua as the first fruits, where do we get that from? Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I apologize. I'm not going to read the whole thing through, but I'm just going to read the actual verse that has that in there. So, but now is Christ risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. This is the use of the term first fruits. He's risen from the dead, and he has become the first fruits of them that slept. And Rav Bernstein, asked, okay, so what does this mean? And someone said beautifully, it means that Yeshua is the first one that resurrected, and he's the first one, this and that. And Rav Bernstein was like, it means more than just what you're familiar with. It doesn't just mean the idea of first, as in first, then second, then third, then fourth. That's not what first fruits is. He said, this is about the Geulah, the exile. Yes, this is about the return to the land. So right now, so this whole idea of the Bikkurim, and I left my book, but Rav Bernstein did a wonderful discussion of what the Bikkurim is. When Moshe is telling the people, it will be when you enter the land. You're gonna enter the land. This is a promise. This is gonna happen. You're gonna enter the land that Hashem your God has given you as an inheritance, and you're gonna take possession of the land. So you're gonna get the Canaanites out, and then you're gonna dwell in the land. All right, these three things have to happen first before we even talking about first fruits. Then you're gonna take the first of every fruit in the ground. I'm reading verse 1 and 2 of chapter 26. Then you're gonna take the first fruit of every fruit of the ground that you bring in from your land that Hashem your God gives you, and you're gonna put it in the basket, and it continues on. So if Yeshua is the first fruits, that means there's some other stuff that has to happen, but this is all about Hashem making that promise to Abraham. I'm going to give you this land. And the Bikkurim is the good. Here the people are. Your descendants are in the land. Not only in the land, but bringing fruit from the land. You can't be a farmer if you're fighting people. You can't be a farmer if you don't own the land. So all these conditions have to be met before they can bring the first fruits. Same thing here. There's some conditions that have to be met for Yeshua that he did in order to be this thing called the first fruit, which is a sign of the making good on the promise. Hashem has made good on his promise. He promised it to Abraham, and look, his children are bringing fruit in joy. And at the end of, I think it's verse 11, it says, bring it in joy. Like, look what Hashem said, and it came true. Same thing for Yeshua. All that stuff applies, not just a little piece of it. The whole understanding of first fruits has to go with this verse here. But now Christ is risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. If you are just sticking to the resurrection part, Rav Bernstein's like, you're missing the point. It's the coming back into the land, no longer being in gullus and exile, but now being in the land in every way that could possibly mean. Inside space and time, outside space and time, all ways that a person can be in the land because, okay? So don't just think that first fruits is about resurrection. It's about the land. It's about Israel's attachment to the land. And then if you don't understand that, then you miss the point. Yeshua, and I'm reading from my notes, Yeshua is the first fruits of the Geulah, the first fruits of the return to the land. He is the first fruits of the return to the land, Yeshua. Yeshua is another way to say Jesus. It's just saying the Hebrew way. If you heard the word Joshua, it's also like that too. Yeshua. It does involve I'm continuing reading my notes. It does involve the resurrection, but this is more broad that Yeshua is the first fruits of the return to the land. So the resurrection is a small piece. That's like saying a farmer has crops. Okay, but there's more to the Bikkurim. It's that farmer and all the people, the farmers had to fight to get the land first. Then they could farm because now it's peace and they're able to farm. Now they plant the trees, and I believe you have to wait 3 years because the trees have to be circumcised, the orlah. You wait 3 years, and on the 4th year, you can eat the fruit. All these things have to happen. Then they can bring in the 4th year. Then they can bring this basket of first fruits. All these things have to happen to show that the promise of being in the land is done. Same with what Rav Shaul is saying. And he as a Jew will understand all the steps it takes to be first fruits. And this is why, and like Rav Bernstein said, the first fruit is given from the Shavuot all the way to Sukkot. It's brought basically the whole year except for Shabbat. So all of this fits into what the Bikkurim is, the first fruits. So let me see. And so again, when you're thinking about the first fruits, think about it as the promise of the actual the making good on the return to the land. Yeshua as the first fruits, the return to the land. Try to think like that instead of just resurrection. That's just a piece of it. Okay. So this is the mitzvah that can be done when Israel goes into the land. All right, so meaning the resurrection as in the first fruits, the presentation of Yeshua is when Israel is no longer in exile. So this is what Rav Bernstein said. This means that the resurrection as in the first fruits, the whole first fruits thing, is, excuse me, it's a presentation, remember you put the fruit in the basket, of Yeshua when Israel is no longer in the gullus. They are no longer in the exile. They are in the land, and you're bringing this basket. You're bringing this to the high priest. This is the sign of the return to the land. That is how you look at this resurrection, all that goes with it when Rav Shaul or Apostle Paul is saying that Yeshua is the first fruit. And that is it. So I hope that you... I hope that makes sense, the difference between the Omer and the Bikkurim. Remember, the Omer is brought every day, those big sheaths of wheat or whatever, versus Bikkurim is in a basket. If the B helps you, Bikkurim, basket, that's fine. The sheaths, the Omer is the sheath. That's the one you have to wave every day. It's got the waving going on with it. And if you... I actually did look on a website, and I found that someone was instructing our Christian people incorrectly and getting these things confused. If you are waving the thing, it's Omer. If you're bringing a basket and making this confession with it, it is the Bikkurim. This is what Rav Shaul is, or Apostle Paul is speaking of, the whole thing that we're reading here in Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 1 through 11, and it keeps going on, but that is what the Bikkurim is. So I hope that is more clear and it makes more sense of what is being presented with Yeshua and the resurrection, this promise of Israel's return to the land. Remember, we are bound to Israel. We are not Israel. So we have to understand these things in a Jewish way. And Yeshua is doing this for his people. And we as non-Jews get the invite to celebrate with them. We might not have been the ones bringing the basket to the temple, but we could have been on the sideline cheering them on as they brought the baskets to the temple. And we are on the sideline cheering as Yeshua is brought by his people as first fruits, however that works symbolically in all things of this nature, outside space and time, inside space and time. And we cheer the Jewish people as they do this, and that's how we are bound to Israel. Doesn't mean that we're doing everything Israel is doing, but we share with them in these appointed times and these commandments that they have to fulfill. So if you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to your comments, and if anything needs to be spelled out a little bit more, please let me know. But I hope that you can see that Rav Bernstein did his best to teach us and let us know he did his job to show us how Israel understands things and to help us with any misconceptions that we would have, thus leading ourselves in the wrong direction, looking over this way when we should be looking over this way, which is the way Israel's looking at. So see you next time. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavuot Tov.